Can you believe it's finally August? The NHL season is really only a few months away, and the Jets appear to be finished most of their business, with one major exception and maybe one of the most important decisions in Jets history.
You're Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, I want to chat a little bit about the Jets' offseason as a whole. It is actually starting to wind down a little bit, and in not that many weeks, when you really think about it, we are going to be chatting about preseason, camp, Penticton, all that fun stuff. If you can believe it, it's already August 4th, or August 5th, my bad. The first week of August, and the Jets appear to be mostly done a lot of their summer business. But there is one last major hurdle for them to clear. It is one that has continued to be in the back burner a little bit just because it is technically not a must complete this offseason, but it is, right? We all know it. The Kyle Connor contract, that is a major specter over the entire Jets' future and really the decision point of this franchise, which sounds really funny to say. And it kind of feeds into talking a little bit about this team being fueled by friendship. Obviously, this team has gone through the absolute ringer the last few years in terms of, the smoldering toxic mess of a previous locker room that has really been rebuilt from the ground up. But does friendship have its limits? And does it eventually hold the Jets back a little bit? I want to chat about that and talk a little bit about just how much tougher the Jets really need to be. I hear this a lot on social media, sometimes in the comments, but is it really toughness that the Jets are lacking? Or is it that their players themselves that they have on the team need to add a level of bite to their game? Want to talk about that, but first, let's chat about the outstanding business. So Winnipeg really doesn't have that much left to take care of, maybe a couple of odds and ends, but the really big thing that is definitely still on their to-do list, of course, is the Kyle Connor contract. And really you can't go into the season without having some level of clarity as to what his future is. Now, I have said this several times. I really don't envision any real scenario where he doesn't come back on a big deal. I would be shocked if the Jets let him go into this upcoming offseason with no deal. I just can't really imagine that Winnipeg wants to roll through the 25 or I guess at this point it's 25-26 season with just the last year on his deal before they have to figure out what he wants to do after that. KFC, I would imagine, is one of those core pieces in this team's eyes. And in a lot of ways, I do understand it, and I don't disagree. I think the biggest thing with KFC is what version of him do you get throughout the duration of his contract? If you sign him to a mega 5 or 6 year deal, maybe even 7 or 8, you have to really hope that by the time he starts to hit his early 30s, that the skating doesn't start to slow down. That's really one of the biggest things that powers a lot of his game. And for a lot of NHLers out there, it can sometimes be the first thing to go. I'm a little less worried about that with KFC. I don't think that his skating is necessarily going to be a particular problem. If there's anything that I do wonder about, it's that commitment to defense, right? He had a really strong season relative to his own expectations this past year. And look, no one's going to sit there and say that he was a defensive maestro. He wasn't, right? But he was at least doing some of the basics. He back-checked more. He man-marked more. He forced a few more turnovers. And I think it actually had a really noticeable impact on just how much offense he was allowed to then create. He's always been one of those guys who's really a volume shooter. It actually hurts his shooting percentage a lot because he's not really the clinical type. He can certainly score some crazy goals, but if you look at a lot of the other players on this team, and I didn't even realize this until somebody pointed it out recently, but he takes a ton of shots. And so, by virtue of shooting as much as he does, that's how he gets a ton of his points production. He is still a good finisher, don't get me wrong. And I think that would be something you don't really want to overlook. But if you look at like the most elite shooters on this team, it's guys like Scheifele. Scheifele shoots at like 18% every season, which is just crazy. So with KFC, you just wonder, once you head into this contract, what are you really getting out of him? And does this team have a willingness to change how they do things? I think in a lot of ways, one thing that has been a bit of a bugbear for the Jets the last several years is that they are very committed to a very specific style of hockey and a very specific arrangement to suit that hockey. And sometimes I think that really holds the team back from what their potential could be. When they have traditionally tried to change things under Maurice, didn't always go so well. Maurice kind of threw things in a blender, didn't exactly have the best results. Arneal's first interim tenure, I thought, had a couple of meaningful changes, sometimes due to injury, sometimes due to some underperformance. And some of those changes really had a profound impact on the team, and it wasn't just a Hellebuck thing. But again, very small sample size, not going to read a ton into it. And so, this decision point for the team really is quite big, right? This is a thing where the Jets could go either way. And, I think Winnipeg absolutely views Connor as the guy to bring back. I'm sure that we're looking at basically an 8-figure deal. It's at least $11.5 million, and I guarantee you it's going to be more than that. I'd be shocked if they can get him under 12, but I can't really see that, right? He holds all the cards here. He is, a team and fan favorite, and I just think the Jets view him as a core piece. And if he does go into the season without a major extension locked down, you start to question what his ambitions are outside of Winnipeg. Do you think that he wants to go back to Detroit and maybe the Michigan area? Where else could KFC go? And the reality is he could name his destination. KFC is going to be, if he hits the market, one of the most valued names anywhere. He is a player that I think teams would practically foam at the mouth and give you their left arm for. And it's why in the past I've sort of wondered, in an alternate reality where maybe you trade Connor, what would you get back? And would that value that you get back be greater than what he's giving you? Because obviously you're talking about a 90-plus point forward, somebody who has a ton of skill and is very clearly, a very luxury goal scorer. But maybe, if you're a team like the Jets that's sort of built to win by committee, does he fit that model? And I've wondered that in the past. Again, it's not really a relevant question with this Jets team because Winnipeg absolutely loves him. I just can't see a scenario where he doesn't extend. And I would have to think that as we start winding down towards October, that we start getting more and more buzz towards this. I know preliminary conversations have already been held, so it's just a matter of locking down that number and term. And I can't really imagine that this is going to go on for too much longer before they sort of nail it down. I wonder in some regards if the Jets have sort of forecasted part of this as where they're looking at the Sandberg deal and money that's eventually coming off the books in the next couple of seasons, trying to balance all of that out. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, but, this one feels pretty safe to lock up in the they're going to get it done very soon book. But, as with anything, you sometimes have very unexpected moments that really throw everything up in the air. This one doesn't feel like that, but after the whole Sandberg thing took a while, and maybe you wonder if the KFC thing is going to take a while, I'm not going to necessarily write anything into stone just yet, but in terms of things that do feel like they're definitely going to happen in the near future, the KFC deal feels like it's going to be the thing. And at that point, once you do this, you are really committed to this core. You're committed to this group of players. And I want to chat about whether all of this is going in the right direction. This team is fueled by friendship, as I like to say. And I wonder just how far the power of friendship really takes you when you look at what the Jets have gone through during the regular season, how successful they've been there, and why it doesn't always translate in the playoffs. We'll chat about that in just a brief moment. But before we do, I did want to talk to you about how to manage your money. It's a lot like Cheveldayoff being in charge of the team. It's a tricky balance, and Monarch Money is here to help. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app, though. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. And in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. Imagine if you had Kyle Connor on your books for streaming services and you didn't even know it, right? All of that money isn't just in one thing that you're subscribed to, it's across multiple. And Monarch Money can help you identify those sources and help you start to trim them down. It's a great service, it's all in one place. And if you've got a partner or spouse, you can have a shared account so you can set goals together and always be on the same financial page. It's convenient, it's great, and we have a special offer for all of you who are listening. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Hey friends, welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting a little bit about this Jets offseason. And something came up earlier today, might have been from the Illegal Curve guys. They were talking about, some of the friendship and stuff that's sort of developed with this team over the last several years. And some of the players have been asked about it on and off. And, obviously, a couple of years ago under Maurice, things had really declined. And when I look at that, I think what Bones did in the interim couple of years that he was here really saved this team, right? And I think a lot of credit, despite whatever misgivings one may have had with some of the lineup choices, zero question that he quite honestly put this team in a much better position in the years after. Rebuilding that locker room out of the toxic cesspool that it was when he came in, that is a tremendous feat and something that I think deserves, in many ways, like a metaphorical statue outside the rink in Bones' honor. Like the dude straight up just put the team in a much better position organizationally speaking. And again, it didn't really lead to playoff success. That is a criticism that we had heard about him in his time with Dallas. But, in that moment, right, the main thing that you needed was to get the team righted and the ship back on track. And he did that. So the Jets are a tight-knit team. They're a family. Lots of friendship, lots of commitment, and the guys apparently really believe in each other. They think that this is the group that can get it done. And in many ways, I don't disagree with that. But I do wonder if at times, when you look at how they want to play and sort of the guys that they want to play with, it really puts the team in a very tight position because Connor and Scheifele are nearly inseparable. You look at the Lowry line being essentially united until death do us part. And I just sort of wonder, at what point does Winnipeg realize that maybe they have to spread out the wealth a bit more? You look at the Jets roster, and especially this year, it's not as talented as it's been maybe in other seasons. Now, I think that there's a real chance that we have some young kids who do fight for some spots this coming year, and I am very excited about that. I think the youth could be a very big X factor on the season, and as we get closer to preseason and stuff, I'll talk a little more about that because I think for me, that could be one of the biggest storylines that we have talked about a bit, maybe haven't dug too deep into. I don't really know what to expect from a lot of these kids, and I just don't know how the Jets view it, right? Like, I don't know what their view of the season is. Publicly, the Jets have said that they want to win a cup and that they would do anything to make it happen. And yet you look at this offseason, and I didn't get that vibe at all. They've certainly locked down a couple of players. They've signed some extensions. They brought in 4 free agents on 1-year deals. But none of those guys really moves the needle. Taves may, but I'm not really counting on him because we just don't even know what he's going to be capable of. It's not necessarily a knock on him. The guy's just literally been off the ice for 2 years and hasn't played an NHL game since 2023. And it's not like the league has, tremendously changed since then. But for a guy who hasn't had a game fitness and readiness level at NHL standards for a couple of years now, it's asking a lot for him to jump back in and potentially even be your 2C. So I just don't know what Winnipeg's approach is here. And if the guys aren't really willing to change and willing to experiment more, I kind of feel like what's happened in the past is going to happen again, right? The Jets will have a very solid regular season. They might finish anywhere from the 2 to 4 range in the Central, which I think if they finish in that area, it's going to be by very close margins, right? I don't think that it's going to be one of those situations where Winnipeg just suddenly falls off a cliff or whatever. It's going to be a step back, but it's not going to be the crazy kind where you look at it and think, oh, this is like a scary step back. The team's decline is really here. I don't know that I see that so much as I just see, in the margins where you need to be better to really, cement top seed status. Maybe Winnipeg doesn't have those margins as much anymore. And so, I just hope that when we walk into this season, the Jets are more willing to change things. The top line is decent, and it was a lot better this year than it was the previous season, but it still wasn't a top line compared to what you see around the league. And even with just raw time on ice deployments, that trio played more than any other line combination in the NHL by like 250, 300 odd minutes. It was actually insane to me because I don't think I realized that disparity. Even compared to top contenders, they still make more lineup adjustments than the Jets do. Some of that's due to health. Some of that's also due to preference and tactical adjustments and changes. And I feel like the Jets are just a little too rigid. And part of that comes because the dudes are so tightly knit that they want to play with each other on the same line. They want to be, to some degree, having a say in their deployment. So that's fine. That's all part of a normal work environment. But I think right now the Jets need to start thinking outside the box. If they want to really go deep in the playoffs, I think it's going to be one of those things where you have to have some tough introspection about how you can really maximize and get the most out of this team. I think that there's a lot of individual talent here that can get some things done. And look, right, like the Jet squad, obviously this year isn't as deep as it was last year. And I do think that, I may have said that there's a lot of talent here. It's not going to be on the level of a Florida Panthers. But if you want to give yourself the best chance to try and go deep and give the Jets incentive to add to it at the trade deadline, maybe this is the time to start getting interesting and experimental, right? And I'm not saying like throw everything into the blender. Don't do that. But maybe experiment with some new combos. If you're going to have Scheifele and Connor together, maybe it's time to put Perfetti up there. Cole has proven to be a really good balance to Connor's defensive lapses because Cole was a very smart player. He reads and anticipates ahead of like plays before they've developed maybe 2 to 3 passes in advance. He can see when a counter's starting and he shuts them down pretty quickly. And he's also smart enough to make maybe some hay along the half wall and perhaps offer a good scoring outlet for Scheifele and Connor, or just also a really good passer. And this isn't really a knock on Velarde. I just think, Velarde hasn't really kept up at 5v5 in the same way alongside those two guys when he's asked to do so much already. And so, I look at this as a chance to maybe try and shift some pieces around, spread out that wealth. I think in an ideal world, you would have tried Ehlers up on the top line a little more. Obviously, that didn't happen. It is what it is. But now this is an opportunity where, the Jets roster on paper looks weaker than it was last year. Experiment more, split up some combos, try some new things, see if you can't make a more balanced top 9 that more consistently wins those matchups. The Jets matchups didn't get won as often as I think people thought they did last year. When it comes to like 5v5 play, the Jets were kind of more middle of the pack. And that's like one of the single biggest predictors of postseason success is 5v5 shot share. If you start to really control that, you will go a lot deeper in the playoffs. Most of the top championship teams or even cup finalists or just conference finalists have usually been at the top of their 5v5 game. Very few exceptions to this. When they do happen, again, it's fairly infrequent. The Oilers, everyone always makes fun of them, still one of the top 5v5 teams. The Panthers, a top 5v5 team. The Stars used to be, they weren't so good this year, especially heading into the playoffs, but we know that they can be. And so I look at all of these things, and I just think that the Jets kind of need to get creative and start to follow suit. Drive play at 5v5. You have so much of the defensive game locked down. You've really turned the power play and even the PK around to a point. Now it's time to get that offense at 5v5. in a better spot. And I think if you start to redistribute the talent here, you can really make this team punch above its weight. I always think Winnipeg is a little bit of a scrappy underdog, and this is a chance to really make good on that and start to give the team more of a chance at 5v5. It's already in a very solid place, but it can be even better and maybe get them a few extra playoff wins when you need it most. But curious to know your thoughts there. Do you think that the Jets need to make those changes? Do you think that the power of friendship sometimes prevents them from doing that? Drop your thoughts in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Closing us out, I did want to chat a little bit about the question of toughness, because that's something I often get, comments about when I talk about some of the young prospects in our system. Even at the trade deadline, I've heard this in the comments below or even on social media. And so it's time to really talk about whether or not the Jets really need more size and grit and toughness, or if this is more of a mentality thing that has to be the change rather than making personnel changes. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us in tonight's show as we are wrapping up here with some thoughts on the idea of toughness. And I hear this a lot when it comes to the playoffs. A lot of people say, well, when you get to the postseason, you have got to be tougher, more physical, grittier, bigger, stronger. And I don't think that this is wrong. I think a lot of times where people will sometimes go a little awry is that they really focus on the idea of toughness correlating to size and physical strength. And yeah, big guys can be really tough and physical. We've seen that plenty of times with guys like Bufflin. You've seen that at times with Stanley, who occasionally will win some physical battles. But more often than not, toughness can be a mental thing as much as it is a physical thing. And I look at a team like the Florida Panthers. When you look at their lineups and you see the kinds of players that they have, who do you think are some of their most physically aggressive guys? It's not necessarily, the Kulikovs of the world. It's kind of the guys like Bennett, right? Bennett, Tkachuk, Marchand. These guys get under your skin in a way that not many other players can. And they also bring legitimate skill, right? It's not just a one thing that they do. And I think sometimes, this league is moving in a direction where they're trying to bring back bigger defensemen and stuff. And like size is helpful sometimes, but the primary thing that you need is really high-end skill. And I think to me, what makes the Panthers such an annoying and like frankly dirty team at times is how much they will poke and prod at you. They'll cross-check you in the margins. They will throw out some occasionally cheap hits. That is kind of this thing where, it's really an across the lineup thing. They are a very physically tough team, but they kind of do it in sneaky ways. This isn't a team that immediately just dominates you in the usual sense. They control the play, at 5v5, and they out-chip you, right? Like, they will occasionally take a few too many penalties. It's something that Maurice kind of got in trouble with this season with this team. But, at the end of the day, they are a very tough team, and they win in so many other ways. They win in skill, in depth, and they will kind of bully you at times. But you don't really see a ton of overly big physical enforcer types on this team. That's not how they are coached, and it's not how they play. And so I think the Jets, when I look at this team, Winnipeg in the past couple of years has usually been a top 10, top 15 tall team, and it really doesn't make that much of a difference. The size isn't what gets the team a tougher reputation. You look at the size, in fact, and if anything, it's been a hindrance for the Jets. Shen, nice guy, absolute warrior, a locker room leader. He was just too slow. I think that was very noticeable when he started to get pressured by the faster teams in the corners. And as much as we can say that he's, a guy that teams will rally around and has a lot of playoff experience, I think the Jets were asking more of him, and I don't think that fit necessarily correlated. He's been on some cup-winning teams before, and he's got some rings, but how the Jets are built and what they asked of him, I don't think aligned with what those teams were doing already. He was more of a depth piece on those squads and not somebody who I think the Jets were kind of hoping to be this more towering, imposing physical D-man that could eat a few extra minutes. It didn't really work out. Tanev, tough, chippy, didn't really contribute a lot offensively. Again, super nice guy, and I'm sure the team and the players were thrilled to have him back. But the team just needed more out of these guys and needed, frankly, more needle movers rather than just adding size and strength. And I think that that's a challenge for this team. I think it's something that Winnipeg has really struggled to nail down. But I'll say this. I think as they've gotten closer to that ideal in their drafting over the last few years, I think the team kind of understands that. And, you look at Sandberg, and I think Sandberg is such a great example of this. That dude is a relentless workhorse. He's big, he's strong, he skates well. He's not the most physical of players, but he will absolutely cross-check and shove you out of the way if he needs to. He can lay a big hit too. Pionk also plays above his stature. That guy will throw a hip check like few others on this team. And that's where I kind of think, it's not the size of the dog, but it's the size of the fight in the dog. And maybe this is something that just has to be done across the lineup with the players. Not that I want the Jets to get themselves in trouble and throw out cheap hits or maybe get some more penalties, but maybe finding ways to get under skin, agitate, and be more mentally aggressive. Maybe that's how you start to penetrate, right? Because I don't think just getting taller moves that needle. Stanley is 6'7", and he's actually one of the softer players on the team. He'll drop the gloves, and he has thrown some really big hits over his career. But you notice a lot of the times when you're actually looking at those board battles and sort of those one-on-one physical duels, he doesn't win those as often as you would think. And so I think the kind of toughness the Jets need to develop is a different kind. And I don't know how they get there. I don't know if it's something that's just going to kind of come with the sort of players that you bring in, guys with winning pedigrees. Maybe you develop some players who are, maybe a bit of a feistier sort. I look at some of the players that they've drafted recently, Kevin He and some of those guys. Not necessarily like big physical players, but they have a relentless motor and they'll get under your skin. They might not be getting into every scrum, but I think the way that they can work in those spaces, agitate, get through those defenders, I think it's just going to spark natural reactions. And, how the Jets sort of respond to that will be very interesting. So, all this to say that I think the team has a different kind of toughness to develop, one that can handle adversity, make it through some of those really big struggles when things don't go your way. And I think they crossed the big threshold of that during this past postseason. And it now it's kind of getting all of these pieces all together and assembling your ideal playoff team. So, adding just size, not going to move the needle. I think you need toughness of a lot of different varieties. And already Winnipeg has shown that mentally they have definitely grown a lot compared to the season before and this year. And now it's continuing to hone that, maybe finding ways to, draw that extra penalty, piss off guys a little more. I think Cole kind of describing himself as a prick is a great example. Get under skin. Be, this sneaky little devil of a player. Maybe you don't have the biggest stature, but you know how to get in somebody's face and make them make the mistake first. That is how you can maybe, punch above your weight and start to really become that fear team. But curious to know how you all think of this. Do you really agree, or do you still think you need more size? Not that I would say size is a bad thing, but hopefully if the Jets do acquire size, it is skilled size. That's my primary focus. Make sure that it's mobile, and being big can be a nice side benefit as well. But appreciate y'all listening and handling our wonderful offseason waiting game. It's been a little bit of a stretch to sit here and hope that the Jets make some big moves soon. Curious to know what you want, to us to talk about over the next few weeks. I am probably going to focus a little more on some of the prospects and guys who are sort of on the cusp and what they could do for the Jets, because there is a chance that some of them will. Maybe in limited sample sizes, but we'll have to wait and see. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We will see you back here tomorrow with more Jets offseason coverage, so see you then. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.